I want to double click on your transition into Meta because a lot of people want to work there. Right now, they pretty much pay at the very top of the market in terms of growth product and product management pay. If you're trying to help somebody reverse engineer how Meta reached out to you, what are some of the tips and things they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think what I would do is like put yourself in the recruiter's shoes. And the recruiter, like their main job is to be able to find candidates that will then get hired. Like that's like their primary metric. That's their success. That's what all their bonus is tied to. So one of the big things I would encourage you to do is honestly, like look at LinkedIn to see where the people that are now in the roles that you're wanting had worked in the past. So for me, I hadn't been looking at Facebook, and no one really at my company had been at Facebook before. But you have recruiters, you have sourcers that are constantly setting out feelers on LinkedIn, and eventually they find little honeypots of maybe overlooked talent that really fits this role that they have really well. And what they'll end up doing is trying to exploit it as much as possible. So the recruiters at Meta for the growth marketing team found out that, hey, indeed, for their digital marketing team and their online marketing team, they operate very similar to how our team's growth marketing team works. So what ended up happening is I think almost every single person on my online marketing team at the time ended up working at or interviewing at Facebook. The recruiters got hungry and went all in at once. At one point, my interview was originally scheduled for a Friday, and I was really excited to be able to spend the weekend in San Francisco on Facebook's dime. However, at the last minute, they moved me to like a Tuesday. And I found out another one of my colleagues was interviewing on Friday, and I imagine they didn't want us to overlap in person to run into each other. And again, the internet marketing team at Indeed was fairly small, and we were fairly open with each other, at least at some level. So we knew that some of us were interviewing at there. So I brought it up with my recruiter. I'm like, hey, just a heads up, like I know this person is going to be there on Friday. If the reason you moved me to Tuesday is because of that, like it's not a big deal. Like I can roll with it. Like we're not doing anything, or not doing anything there. And actually set up all kinds of like fire drills on their end, because they're like, oh no, like they might be talking to each other. We need to make sure that there's no overlap in any interview questions. We need to make sure just like a lot of extra things that I hadn't fully appreciated as someone who had now done interviews for Facebook, but hadn't been thinking about, where it's like, oh, okay, I actually set off a lot of like red flags where it caused extra headache potentially for the people that were interviewing me. But essentially the recruiters found a little honeypot and then exploited it as much as they can. And as you have new sourcers coming into those roles doing their hiring, what they're going to do is, one, go through and see what worked for their past sourcers, see what companies that they tapped into. And then they're also going to go through the job profiles of the people that are currently there and see like, all right, this person is super successful in this role. Where were they before this? How do I find this person before I now have to poach them from another FANG, because it's going to be even harder convincing them to leave, and going through like maybe 2 jobs before. And you'll find different trends and kind of like honeypots of companies that are really big feeders for like the FANG companies. Like one notorious one within Facebook is if you're looking at like for a data role, whether it's on the team I was on, which is product marketing, which was again growth marketing turned into product marketing. I know that's something that we wanted to talk about, or also even like data science. You'll see a lot of people come from a handful of companies. One of those really being Capital One. And what ends up happening is Capital One just has a phenomenal ability to bring in college grad talent and train them up from raw college grad to really strong data scientists, analysts, and marketers. And some companies, oftentimes, like the Facebooks of the world, they're not as strong at bringing someone in from zero and training them up. They're much more, they do a better job, and they're willing to pay for bringing someone in who can already has that skill set and kind of hit the ground running. This is different for engineering, obviously. Engineering, they have an entire pipeline, but for like every other role, having an entry-level function there is more rare. Like even on the product management side, like there's some coming in through those APM or associate product management roles or the rotational product management systems, but those are a fraction of the amount of people that come in from already having industry talent. So finding out where those honeypots are of that those recruiters like to consistently tap into is one of the things that I would encourage people to like look into. Like, okay, if you're wanting to end up at Facebook, finding the companies that feed into those types of roles at somewhere like Facebook.
Is it fair to say like Capital One and Indeed, what the similarity is those are like $100 billion market cap companies and Facebook is like $1 trillion market cap. So is it fair to say that like it's often those companies that are kind of one rung below in market cap that you should try to get into?
Yeah, I mean, Indeed was much smaller at the time than that. I had been there and they just gotten acquired by Recruit, which is a Japanese job holding company, and it was definitely like multiple rungs below at the time in terms of just like revenue scale. Large number of users though. I think it's like generally that I think that trend holds true where it's like identifying those honeypots of, because again, it's not going to be a honeypot if it's like a super small company. It's just going to be more of a one-off. Like it definitely exists people at very small startups, but from a recruiter standpoint, maybe I'll find one person at the startup that's even worth being able to bring in for an interview. But if I get an in within somewhere like a Capital One or like somewhere that has an established team, like maybe at Indeed, where there's a dozen people that I can talk to, it's kind of the way to think about it. It's like you could be that one person at the company, but it's gonna be hard to find you, or you can be one of a handful of people with similar skill sets. That's just gonna be easier for the recruiters to come across you. Yes, there's all these things that you could do to be proactive. Like if I was being very intentional around wanting to work at somewhere like a Facebook or a Google, and I knew I had the skill set already, then naturally what I would do to be intentional about it is like tap into my network, try to see if there's anyone I have in my network that works at those places. Because what people don't realize is if you have a referral going into these companies, oftentimes there's an entirely separate pipeline for referrals versus people that are outreached by recruiting. And it's a way to, or if you apply directly, like there's all separate pipelines. Like the recruiter, if they self-source you, it goes through one pipeline. If you're referred, it goes through another pipeline. If you apply, it goes through a different one. So just identifying what advantages that you can have is really going to be important. And if you're wanting to work there, making sure to see if you have someone in your network already, ideally, that you've worked with in the past, to be able to tap into them, do that before you apply. I think the biggest mistake I see people do is they'll apply and then reach out like, hey, Andre, I just applied at Facebook. Can you refer me? I'm like, you already applied. You're in the system. I can't do anything. Like I will help you and talk to you about the thing that you're wanting to talk about, but you're already in the system. Like this is a CRM based machine that I can't, like there's not a lot I can do. I can like poke the recruiter, but it's an entirely separate process. The self-apply versus the referred pipelines.